The frost came early to Hollow that year, settling into the valley like something that had always intended to stay. Rowan noticed it first in her garden, the way the bean vines curled inward overnight, blackened at the edges, as though flinching from a cold no one else had felt yet. She wrapped her shawl and knelt to save what she could of the last squash, working with the quick, economical movements of a woman who had long since stopped expecting help. Her cabin sat at the far edge of town, where the road gave up trying to be a road and became little more than a rutted path through scrub pine. She had built the back room herself 2 summers ago, notching the logs with her late husband's tools because there had been no one else to ask. It leaned a little to the north. She had made her peace with that, the way she had made her peace with most things. 26 years old, and already the valley called her the Widow Rowan, as if there were only one, as if the name itself were a warning stitched to her back. She had buried 2 husbands. Daniel first, 3 winters past, taken by a fever that swept through half the valley and left the rest of them wondering why it had chosen him and spared their own. Then Practical, Steady, who had married her 8 months later, not for love exactly, but because a woman alone on good bottomland was a problem the valley wanted solved, and a widower with 3 motherless children was a problem too, and it had seemed at the time like arithmetic more than romance. Had died in a rockslide while surveying a claim up past ridge, and by the time they found his body the ravens had already been at it 3 days. After that, nobody did arithmetic with Rowan anymore. She walked into town on Thursdays when the trading post restocked, and she felt the particular quality of a silence that followed her down the boardwalk. Not unkind exactly, not cruel, but careful, the way people are careful around a place where lightning has struck twice. Mrs. crossed to the far side of the street with her basket held close to her chest. The Kettering boys, 9 and 11, had been told, knew this because she'd overheard it once, unguarded, through a thin wall, not to play near her fence line, on account of what happened to menfolk who got close to her. At the trading post, old man short-changed her 4 cents on a bolt of muslin and would not meet her eyes while doing it, as though eye contact might let something transfer between them. She counted the coins twice, said nothing, and put the difference down to the cost of being tolerated. It was not that the valley hated her. That, she sometimes thought, might have been easier to carry. Hatred had shape and reason. What she carried instead was something softer and more corrosive, pity wearing the mask of fear, sympathy that curdled the moment it came near enough to require action. They were sorry for her in the abstract, the way people are sorry for weather. What kept her fed, what kept the cabin standing, was not sympathy but usefulness. Had a gift, inherited from her grandmother and sharpened by 7 years of hard frontier winters, for reading the land which roots would hold through a dry summer, which seed stock would take in this thin mountain soil, which bark and root and leaf could bring down a fever or settle a cough. She kept jars of dried yarrow and echinacea root lined along her back wall like a small, quiet army, and twice a month one of the valley wives would come to her door after dark, ashamed to be seen needing her, and trade eggs or cloth for a remedy she wouldn't get from Doc's thinning supply of tonics. They needed her. They simply preferred not to be seen needing her. She had stopped minding mostly. What she minded more, if she was honest with herself in the long hours after the lamp was out, was the assumption underneath the whole arrangement, the assumption that she was waiting for a man brave enough or foolish enough to overlook the stories, waiting to be rescued from a life she had, in fact, built with her own 2 hands. She did not want rescuing. She had tried the alternative twice now, had given herself over to the shape of a marriage both times, and both times the valley had found a way to make the loss that followed feel like something she had caused rather than something that had simply happened to her, the way frost happens, the way rockslides happen. She did not think she would try a 3rd time. Trust, she had come to believe, was a fire you fed carefully or not at all, and she had grown tired of watching hers get stamped out by other people's fear. The frost deepened that week into the season's first hard freeze. spent the evening chinking a gap in the north wall with mud and dried moss, her hands raw by lamplight, calculating, the way she calculated everything now, how many logs remained in her woodpile and how many weeks of a Wyoming winter that pile would need to survive. Not enough. She already knew it wasn't enough. She banked the fire low to save the wood, pulled 2 quilts over herself, and slept the thin, listening sleep of a woman who had learned not to expect anyone to come. In the morning, she opened the door to fetch water and stopped on the threshold. Stacked against the porch post, split clean and dry and higher than her knee, sat a cord of firewood that had not been there the night before. No note, no tracks she could make sense of, save the faint impression of boots leading back toward the tree line and the ridge beyond it, and then nothing, as if whoever had left it had simply meant to leave and nothing more. The firewood kept coming. Every few days through that first hard week of winter would open her door to find another stack against the porch post, never announced, never explained, the snow around it churned by boot prints that always led back toward the tree line and up, toward the ridge where the Hale place sat. She knew the name the way she knew most names in hollow, second-hand and thin. Thomas Hale. A rancher who kept to himself on the high ground above the valley. 6 years in the territory and still, as far as anyone could say, a stranger to it. She had seen him twice at a distance. A tall, unhurried man with a gray gelding and a habit of nodding once briefly to whoever he passed, as if a nod were the full extent of what he owed the world. He had never, to her knowledge, spoken to her directly. By the third delivery, she had decided she did not care for mysteries left on her doorstep, however useful. She waited that evening with a lamp burning and the door unlatched, and when she heard the crunch of snow under boots, she stepped out before he could set the wood down and leave the way he always did. "You can stop," she said before he'd fully straightened. "Whatever it is you're after, I haven't got it to give." He didn't startle, which she found she resented a little. He simply looked at her, not the careful, sideways look she'd grown used to from the town, but something steadier, almost businesslike. "I'm not after anything, Mrs. Rowan." "Everyone's after something." "Some folks are." He set the last of the split logs onto the stack unhurried. "I had a cord going spare. You've got a leaning cabin and a north wall I'd guess is losing more heat than it keeps. Didn't seem a hard thing to fix. And the groceries last Tuesday. I don't recall a cabin needing flour and salt pork." That at least earned a faint, rueful breath that might have been the start of a laugh in a different man. "No, that one I'll own. Heard you hadn't been to the trading post in near 2 weeks, and old doesn't exactly extend credit to—" He stopped himself. "To the unlucky widow," she finished for him flat. "To anybody he can get away with shorting," Thomas said instead, and something in the correction, small, deliberate, refusing to let the town's word stand in for his own, caught her off guard more than any kindness had. She studied him a moment in the lamplight. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why you? Every soul in this valley's decided I'm cursed, or close enough, and you're up here hauling wood like it's nothing owed to anybody." Thomas was quiet long enough that she thought he might simply nod and go, the way he did with everyone else. Instead, he leaned against the porch rail, looking out at the dark tree line rather than at her, which she understood without being told was its own kind of courtesy. "My mother buried my father when I was 9, he said. "Logging camp up near the Canadian line. After that, the camp wives decided there was something about her that drew bad luck, same as folks here have decided about you. Nobody said it outright, just stopped inviting her to things, stopped trading fair. She got sick 2 winters later, a fever that wasn't much of anything if you catch it early, and nobody came near enough soon enough to help her catch it early." He turned the log in his hands once, then set it down. "I was 12. I've had a long time to think about what a little help, offered without wanting credit for it, might have cost those people. Not much, as it turned out. Less than what it cost her." Said nothing for a while. The cold moved between them, but it didn't feel, for once, like the kind she had to guard against. "I don't need saving," she said finally, quieter than she meant to. "I never said you did." He picked his hat back up from where he'd set it on the rail. "I said you needed a wall that holds heat and a woodpile that lasts January. Different thing." It was, she thought, the first time in 3 years someone had drawn that particular line for her between pity and practicality, and she found she believed him. The arrangement that followed was not courtship, not at first, whatever the town would later decide to call it. Thomas kept bringing wood and groceries when the trading post shorted her, but he never lingered past what the task required, never reached for her hand under some invented pretext, never once asked what everyone else in the valley seemed desperate to know, whether the stories were true, whether some ill fortune truly did follow her from one man to the next. In exchange, she began teaching him what she knew of the land, which roots along the creek bed could ease a fever, which bark, boiled right, could bring down a swelling. He, in turn, showed her how to read weather in the shape of clouds banking against the western ridge, a rancher's knowledge she'd never had cause to learn. It was practical. It was, she told herself more than once, nothing more than two self-sufficient people trading what they knew, the way anyone in the valley traded eggs for muslin. Then, in the second week of true winter, sickness came down off the ridge with the cold, not the fever that had taken Daniel, but something faster, meaner, moving first through the youngest children in town. Doc's tonics ran thin within 3 days, and standing at her own back wall lined with jars of yarrow and willow bark, found herself afraid, not of the sickness, but of what it would mean to walk into town and offer to help and be wrong. "If a child dies with my hands in it," she told Thomas, the night he found her sitting still instead of working, "they won't call it bad luck anymore. They'll call it proof." He didn't argue with her fear. He only said, "And if you hide what you know and a child dies anyway, what do you call that?" She did not sleep that night. She sat instead with her grandmother's ledger of remedies open on her lap, rereading pages she already knew by heart, as if the familiar words might steady something in her that fear had shaken loose. By first light she had made her decision, though it did not feel like courage so much as the plain refusal to let a child suffer for the sake of her own safety. She packed what she had: dried yarrow, willow bark, the last of her echinacea root, a jar of honey to cut the bitterness for small mouths, and walked into Hollow before the sun had cleared the ridge. Doc met her at the Kettering door, hollow-eyed from 3 sleepless nights, and did not ask her the question she'd braced herself for. He only stepped aside. "Show me what you've got." She worked through that day and into the next, moving between the Kettering boys and 2 younger children at the place, steeping willow bark for the fevers, easing the worst of the coughing with honey and yarrow, sitting with mothers who had crossed the street to avoid her only weeks before and now would not let go of her sleeve. She made no promises she couldn't keep. She simply did the work, the way she had always done the work, except this time the whole valley was watching. By the 4th day the fevers broke, all of them. She did not expect a parade of gratitude, and none came, not in the way the town might have staged it, with speeches and handshakes. Instead, the change arrived in small, uneven pieces, the way real change usually does. Old Man counted her coins twice at the trading post the following week, out loud, and pushed the correct amount across the counter without being asked. Mrs. left a jar of plum preserves on her porch rail with no note, which understood, without needing one, exactly what it meant. The Kettering boy, the younger one, 9 years old and newly recovered, left a drawing tucked into her gate, a lopsided cabin, a stick figure with yarn yellow hair, and beneath it, in careful, uneven letters, a single word: "Thank you." She kept the drawing. She did not cry over it, though it was a close thing. What moved her more than any of it, though, was the quiet way the fear simply began to lift, not vanish all at once, but thin, the way morning fog thins off the valley floor once the sun has properly risen. Children stopped being steered away from her fence line. She was again, before she was ever the widow, before she was ever unlucky, just a woman the valley had finally troubled itself to actually see. Thomas kept bringing wood through all of it, though there was less need to hide the reason now. He came by most evenings that week, not to be thanked, but simply because the habit had become something neither of them wanted to break. It was on one such evening, the two of them sitting on her porch step with the sky gone the deep blue-black of a mountain winter night, that finally said the thing she'd been turning over since the fever broke. "I've spent 3 years telling myself I didn't need anyone," she said. "Not because it was true, because it was safer to believe." Thomas didn't answer right away, which she'd come to understand was simply his way. He weighed things before he spoke them, the same care he brought to splitting a log along its grain rather than against it. "And now," he asked, "now I think I was hiding from the wrong thing." She looked at him steady, the way she hadn't let herself look at a man in a long while. "I wasn't afraid of losing another husband, Thomas. I was afraid of being loved by someone who'd expect the loving to fix me, like I was something broken that needed mending." She paused. "You never once asked me to be fixed. You just brought firewood." "Seemed the more useful thing," he said, and this time the corner of his mouth did lift, plain and unguarded. "I'm not asking to be rescued," she said. "I want that understood if we're going to say anything more about this." "I never once thought you needed rescuing," Thomas said. "I think you're the strongest built thing in this valley, present company included. I just didn't want to be one more person who left you standing in the cold to prove it." She reached over then and took his hand, her choice, her hand moving first, which mattered to her more than she could have explained to anyone who hadn't buried what she'd buried. He did not propose with flowers, and he did not make a speech. 2 weeks later, on a clear, hard-frozen morning, he arrived not with firewood but with a shelf, small, sturdy, sanded smooth, built to the exact width of her back wall. "For your seed jars," he said, setting it down. "Noticed you'd run out of room on the old one." She looked at it a long moment, plain pine, honest joints, built by a man who measured twice before he cut, and understood it for what it was more clearly than she'd have understood any ring. Not a rescue, not a fix. A place built to last, offered by someone who intended to stay and watch it hold. "Is this you asking me something, Thomas Hale?" "Reckon it might be." "Then yes," she said, before he'd even managed to shape the question properly, and found she meant it all the way through. The following winter, anyone traveling the low road past the edge of Hollow could see smoke rising steady from the chimney of the old leaning cabin, no longer leaning, its north wall rebuilt true, a second room added on for a growing household. The porch stayed stacked with split firewood, more than any two people could reasonably need, because Thomas Hale had simply never broken the habit of bringing it. And in the yard beyond the fence, where children had once been warned to keep their distance, a new crop of them now played without a second thought, chasing each other past a garden gone thick and green come summer, tended by a woman the valley had long since stopped calling unlucky, and started simply calling neighbor.